In New York, a judge has thrown out the lawsuit against the state's eviction moratorium. And in Boston, a judge has once again thrown out the eviction moratorium. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have a couple of interesting articles for you today, and they're going over one of my, hot topics, and that's the eviction moratoriums that are still going on here in the country. So, as I've pointed out before, there are still some state and local eviction moratoriums that are going on throughout the U.S., and most of them have ended, and that's a good thing. However, for those people who live in the state of New York or in the city of Boston, those jurisdictions had tried to keep their eviction moratoriums going. So the first article I'm going over is going over the fact that a judge has thrown out the lawsuit by some Western New York landlords that, was fighting against their state eviction moratorium. And, it's a bad deal overall. I can understand what the judge is saying in this, but at the same time, I feel like the landlords, they're not being given any consideration to what they're going through right now. Now, the good part about that story is that as of right now, the state eviction moratorium in New York is supposed to end in January. So hopefully everything ends at that point, and then they're able to get back to normal business. Now, the second article I have, and it's coming out of Boston, right? And it's going over the fact that a little while ago I covered a story where a judge threw out the city's eviction moratorium because it said that the city didn't have jurisdiction to put an eviction moratorium into place, and that was something that was up to the state itself, and the state does not have an eviction moratorium. So they appealed that decision, and the judge affirmed it recently. So that's good news for landlords up in Boston. Now, before I get into the two articles, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think of what's going on up in New York or what's going on in Boston, okay? Can you believe that this eviction moratorium nonsense is still going on? I mean, we're almost to 2022 at this point. We're only less than 10 days away, and we're sitting here still talking about this mess, okay? So in some places, it's been almost 2 years since they've been allowed to evict anyone. That's ridiculous, okay? And I'm hoping that, like I said, in New York State, come January, it's over. But you never know. It's going to be the middle of winter, and there's going to be a lot of politicians who aren't going to want to start evicting people in the middle of winter. So the first article I have, it comes from buffalonews.com, and it says, Judge dismisses lawsuit filed by Western New York landlords over eviction moratorium. And let me get into it. A judge on Tuesday dismissed a lawsuit brought by 36 landlords who said a pandemic-related eviction moratorium has caused them tremendous financial harm. The landlords called the moratorium unconstitutional, saying it prevents them from meaningfully challenging a tenant's claimed hardship. Even if landlords suspect bad faith on the part of tenants who can't afford to pay rent, they say it's too difficult to challenge under the state's eviction moratorium legislation. But State Supreme Court Justice Jeanette Ogden ruled the landlords lacked standing to bring their case because they hadn't tried to challenge any tenant's hardship claim. You have to try to utilize the statute before you make a due process argument, Ogden said in her oral ruling. And in another lawsuit that had occurred against the state eviction moratorium, the judge threw it out, dismissed it for the exact same reason, because the landlords had not actually tried it yet. And like I said in my last video covering this topic, the landlords, what they have to do is they have to literally challenge it and lose if they want to really truly be able to fight this. And I know that sucks, and penalty of perjury, I think that is the part that the landlords are really hung up on, because they don't want to face criminal charges for challenging a tenant's ability to pay their rent. I mean, that's completely ridiculous. Yet the tenant can bold-faced lie on a form declaring that they need protections through the eviction moratorium because they face financial hardship. They don't have to prove anything. They can bold-faced lie, and they do not face penalty of perjury. Do you think that's a little bit odd? I do, okay? But let's continue. Assistant Attorney General Joel Terragnoli, and I'm butchering the name here, who asked the judge to dismiss the case, said the landlords based their case on claims that if they tried to evict one or more of their tenants, the law might stop them because a court may deny them a hearing to challenge a tenant's hardship declaration. At best, these hypothetical fears of the mere potential for future injury pile speculation atop conjecture and underscore the lack of injury and standing, Taragnoli said in court papers. During the hearing, Taragnoli said, "You have to try to process before you come into court claiming an injury." Yeah, and they make the process so that the landlord would be the one who would get punished if anything goes wrong. The landlord has to pay for their own attorney. They have to fill out a sworn statement that they know the financial status of their tenant when they don't know for sure. But they have a lot of, they're suspect. It's very suspicious when you have a tenant who isn't able to pay rent, but miraculously is able to buy new cars, new TVs, has all their other bills paid. You know what I mean? Come on here. They're still working in their job, but they can't, how is a landlord supposed to know 100%, so, I mean, I think that they put the landlords in a bad situation in this sort of thing, but I do understand what they are saying and why they threw this case out, okay? But landlords almost never have access to the information necessary to do so, Cambria said during Tuesday's hearing. Under the state's current rules, tenants need only file a declaration that says they are unable to pay their rent. Tenants are not required to provide any proof they have lost a job or suffered some other form of financial hardship since the onset of the pandemic. All tenants have to do is check a box on a form, Cambria said. They don't have to prove anything, Cambria said. They don't have to allege anything. All they have to do is check a box. So yeah, like I said, landlords in that case are put into a bad situation. They have to prove the tenants don't need financial help instead of the tenants having to prove that they do need financial help. And the only reason they're doing that is because, the state itself isn't the one who's paying the rent, okay? Like, if it was the state who all of a sudden had to cover for all that lost rent, guess what? They would require the tenants be able to prove that they actually need this financial help. But since it's a private landlord, well, it doesn't matter if these big fat cat landlords get screwed over. Yeah, whatever, man. Completely ridiculous. I'm disappointed that it got dismissed. Maybe they will appeal it, or maybe they'll just wait it out and see if the state eviction moratorium will end. But that kind of leads me up into the second story I have today, and it's coming out of Boston, and it's from universalhub.com, and it says, "Judge once again tosses the Boston eviction moratorium." And some good news for landlords. I start off with the bad news, I'll end with some good news, okay? A housing court judge yesterday denied the city's request to let its pandemic-related ban on evictions continue as it appeals her earlier decision to dismiss the ban. Attorney Richard Vetstein, who filed an amicus brief supporting the landlords in this case, posted a copy of Housing Court Judge Irene Bagdoin's somewhat blistering decision, in which she once again said the city basically has some nerve trying to get around state housing law, that even without the ban, tenants can go to court, fight eviction, and that the city's efforts to negate, even if temporarily, her earlier ruling is jeopardizing the public's belief in an impartial and independent court system in one of the few states with a constitution that explicitly separates the powers of the three branches of government. So yeah, it sounds like the city of Boston, after the judge initially threw out their eviction moratorium, they tried to create some kind of a workaround to get around it. Now, and this judge was not happy about it. And just like she said, the tenants can still go to court, still appeal and fight the eviction during court. So it's not like they're just being kicked straight out onto the curb. And that's what they should do. If you're in a bad situation, hey, maybe you should go out, hire an attorney to help you, and try to fight your case. In addition to not granting a stay of her earlier order banning the city eviction ban during an appeal, Bagdoin also ruled against two tenants, one of whom has a landlord who has been trying to evict her since 2017, well before the pandemic, and who agreed last year in court to seek a new apartment and then didn't. So there's a tenant in one of the cases that she ruled against who has been in there in the unit of this landlord since 2017, and they've been trying to evict this tenant since then. So that's four years right now. I mean, we're going into 2022, so that's nearly 5 years that they've been trying to evict this tenant and haven't been able to do it. The tenant, you know, it frustrates me to no end when I read about, you know, tenants who are abusing the system so much that they can stay in these units for 5 years and probably not paying. Probably not. I would guess not. Okay. But yeah, I mean, good news, bad news for the city who thought they could get away with this stuff. But, you know, good news for landlords up there. I'm glad to hear that, you know, they're finally able to get the ball rolling again, and that, you know, there's not going to be a stay while they're appealing.